Good morning. I'm Jennifer Schenker, Editor-in-Chief of the Innovator, a global publication about innovation and sustainability. And it is my pleasure to be here this morning to moderate this panel about the quantum tipping point. Quantum computing is not just about more computing power. It is a transformative technology which very well may determine the competitiveness of countries, regions, and companies. But we don't know exactly when this quantum tipping point is going to be. Many experts believe that we are getting closer, and when we do, quantum will be able to solve problems that classical computers cannot, and tackle some of the world's biggest challenges. It's an exciting time in the field of quantum computing, and we're likely to see significant progress in the years ahead. This panel will focus on what can we do now and later to ensure that we harness the full power of this technology, and what are the current roadblocks and challenges. So to answer those questions, I have here with me Paula Assis, who is a senior executive at IBM with more than 20 years experience in the IT sector, with a strong focus on how companies can harness technology to become more productive. We also have Jan Goetz, who is the head of a company called IQM, a spin-out of VTT in Finland, which is building the next generation of quantum computers. Then we have Kohei Itoh, who is the founder of the IBM Quantum Computer Network Hub at Keio University in Tokyo. And he's been in the sector for some 24 years, and his research focuses on quantum computing, quantum sensing, and quantum physics. And we also have with us Amy Webb, who is a quantitative futurist who builds data-driven models to forecast probable futures. And she's going to give us a glimpse of what we can expect in terms of use cases and timing. So let's dive right in on our topic, and I'm going to start with you, Jan. Your company is already deploying quantum technologies. You have hardware that is already connecting into data centers, and you have raised quite a bit of money from, among other investors, the World Fund, to help combat the climate crisis with quantum computing. So what do you see as the current key proven and established quantum technologies today that could be deployed at great scale? And what do you see as the key emerging opportunities?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. It's great being here. Maybe before I start going into the use cases, I wanted to put the technology in a bit of a context and comparing it with two other technologies that are widely discussed to make a bit clearer how we think about applications and how widely it's going to be deployed. So one is fusion and then AI. So if you look at fusion, the use case is very clear, and people say it takes X years until we get there, and then I think we really have this tipping point. And I think quantum is not like this, because there is not this one use case that people are looking for, but actually there will be more and more over time as the technology becomes more and more powerful. So I think this is important to understand, that we are not looking for this one use case, but actually it's enabling technologies for many, many use cases, unlike we have it maybe in the fusion case. And the second technology, AI, I think this is also important to understand that we had ideas for use cases for AI already many, many decades ago, and then there was a winter, and the reason was that actually the computing power on the hardware side was not sufficient to train the models and do all of this. And I think for quantum, we are in a similar situation. We have many ideas of what you could do with these systems, but the technology at this moment is not yet powerful enough to really harvest this. But this doesn't mean that the systems that we are building are useless. On the contrary, they're highly useful, and many people are using them around the globe. And the reason is that if we believe in this technology and the use cases, there will be a huge shortage in talent anyway, so we need them to train the people. And then we can also do great science with the systems that we have. So this is kind of the big contents, and then we talk about applications, and you were referring to our latest funding round, where we took this impact investor in. My personal belief is that regarding climate change, it only works if we are all kind of working on this together. And if a technology has only the slightest chance of helping, then we should use it. And this doesn't mean that quantum will solve it all, but quantum can have an impact. And just to give you one example, a lot of the CO2 production actually comes from the global food production, where we are using fertilizers. And this is a very old process, Haber-Bosch process, to produce those. Works at very high temperatures, high pressures, very inefficient, and we don't fully understand it at the molecular level. And quantum computers could help understand those use cases, for example.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. Let's now turn to you, Amy. How do you think these opportunities can be scaled, and what do you see as some of the first use cases? What's the timing look like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so happy that Jan's mentioned artificial intelligence, which is really analogous to I think a little bit of what's happening with quantum in terms of enthusiasm, missed expectations, more enthusiasm, and popularity ebbing and flowing over time. So I'm the CEO of a company called the Future Today Institute. We do long-range scenario planning, and we just focus on technology. So the question that I get asked a lot is, when is the tipping point for quantum? At one point it was big data. When do we need to know about big data, digital transformation, and artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence? And my answer is, I don't know. And the answer, when does the tipping point hit? The reason that the business community wants an answer to that question is because they need to know when the investment has to happen. So here's my answer that I give to executives when I'm asked that question, and then I can offer some thoughts on use cases. The answer is, you have to think about drivers of acceleration. There are three when it comes to quantum computing. The first is technology advancement and components that are maturing. And there are challenges to be overcome, but this is not, this is eventually going to be looked at as a general purpose technology, like the steam engine and the internet before it. And there's no switch, so there's no day that quantum happens, right? It's a transition to get there. And there are lots of challenges that have to be overcome, and once those are overcome, as the technology continues to mature, there will be new challenges. This is a long horizon technology, so that's the first. The second driver of acceleration is adoption. So the roadmap right now is somewhat uncertain because this is a critical new emerging technology. And part of what will drive adoption is it being cost effective. At the moment, supercomputers are still more cost effective than investment in quantum, but again, that will change over time. And the third and most important is commercialization. So it's not enough to have a mature technology, you have to have an ecosystem to support it. And so executives having familiarity with what quantum is at the moment. Again, I think we're at the beginning where people are starting to talk about it, but there's not enough of an understanding inside of among executives, and therefore it doesn't trickle down to the rest of the organization. That will change at some point. The ecosystem that needs to form, and then the talent pool. It's hard. I think that there are clusters of people that are excited about quantum, but at the moment, AI is driving people's decisions about where they're going to be, and also bioengineering. So this third area of really investing in the talent pool will drive commercialization over time. And then you get to tons of use cases. Real-time simulation of cities and being able to make decisions about how city infrastructure moves and works around. Quantum sensing, which I'm sure you'll probably talk a lot about. At some point being able to observe the brain in real time is probably on the horizon. Communications, there are massive problems right now with our undersea cables, and geopolitically, different countries trying to tap into those to observe communications. Quantum communications means potentially not being able to observe those communications in real time, which would be a huge step forward. So my answer is there are lots of positive opportunities and use cases. There are terrifying challenges also. I mean, this great technology can be used for purposes we don't want, but there is no, like, I'm sure everybody's read reports where there's executives or experts saying, this is the year that it happens. My answer is, there's no way to predict that. The math doesn't work. So the best quant models that we can use to understand all of this is breaking apart what would drive acceleration. So those 3 areas that I mentioned are what I pay attention to, and that's what I would recommend everybody think about.
Thank you. So Anna, let me turn to you. So IBM is offering cloud access to the most advanced quantum computers that exist today. How can we accelerate the deployment?
Yeah. So let me start. I think there were some very good initial comments here that I think it's important for us to understand how we are going to position this technology. So first of all, quantum is not going to substitute the classical computer. And actually, we believe in a hybrid model where we're going to have classical computing, the traditional bits, with AI, neurons, and the qubits of quantum, all these working in an orchestrated way and an integrated way. So the way that we are approaching that is we are looking at, in our roadmap, how you address performance, how you generate value by doing more with less, because the exercise of running circuits of quantum is extremely onerous. So how can you break those tasks in a way that you can accelerate more what is done in the quantum circuits? And finally, adoption that Amy mentioned very well. So when we talk about performance, there are 3 elements. Scale, so the amount of qubits that you can actually put in a chip processor. And this year, we reached 433 physical qubits in a chip, which is a tremendous advancement. Let's remember that the first quantum computing that we developed in 2016 had 5 qubits. Now we're talking about 433 and getting to 1,000 by the end of this year. Then you have to address the issue of how the qubits behave inside those chips. That's the issue of quality. And we have a metric for that is volume, which is similar to try to compare to classical computing is how many transistors you could put on a chip. Is how we are addressing the problem of volume, because it's really the ability of those qubits that you have in your chip to behave properly according to quantum physics. And then you have to address the topic of speed, right? How many operations you can actually execute in those circuits that we have. So that's the topic of performance. On adoption, as I said before, is really moving from what we call static circuits to dynamic circuits in a way that you can perform more with the circuits that you have installed. And on adoption, we are looking at the ecosystem from multiple aspects. First, creating a network of partners, companies, universities that are thinking about what are the use cases, what are the problems that quantum is going to solve. Then the developers community. So we have a language that we developed called Qiskit to support in the application development of quantum. Today we have more than 450,000 people registered on the platform to access the opportunity to develop those applications. And finally, we have more than 2 million downloads of the code across multiple users. So we are accelerating very fast. And I think it's very important that we understand that these things are going to be combined with the traditional elements of computing that exist today.
So just a quick follow-up question. If we are able to harness the full potential of quantum, it could make a tremendous difference to industries like pharmaceutical, where today it takes 13 years to develop a drug, costs several $1 billion. It could really speed up that process. But like almost every other technology, along with opportunities come risks.
Right.
And so what many people think of when they think of as quantum is the fact that it could
break all the
encryption that exists today. Mm-hmm. So how should companies and governments prepare for the coming of quantum and make sure that their data is quantum safe?
Yeah, so one of the areas that we soon started work in as we started to develop the technology was really how to create a quantum safe world. And we worked to develop a lot of algorithms in that sense. So the NIST in the United States identified or is recommending 4 algorithms for quantum safe encryption. We are providing 3 out of those 4, and we strongly encourage all the companies and governments to start implementing really actions and initiatives to make sure that the data is quantum safe.
Thank you. So, Kohei, I want to turn to you now. We've heard about, why quantum should be on everyone's radar, but there is a big issue which Amy also touched on, and that is talent. There's a huge gap. As many as 90% of the positions in quantum couldn't be filled today because we just don't have the trained people. So how do we overcome that?
Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about talent, but also about the roadmaps that we have. So basically, we started using IBM quantum computer since in 2018, 5 years ago, when they first introduced their IBM Q quantum computers on cloud. And the first IBM Q quantum computer we touched could only perform only 1 step of calculation. And we kind of went hopeless because that was really the first quantum computer we touched. We were excited that we were able to use the real quantum computer, but it was only 1 step of calculation. But then within 2 months, after we complained or we suggested to make some improvements,
I love that.
they introduced new quantum chip that allowed us to perform 2 steps of calculation. And double in 2 months, right? We were so happy, in fact. But that kept happening in every 2 months. So right now, after 4 years, quantum computer, by our sort of impression, is like kindergarten kids. So it can almost do everything, but not at the scale, not at the level that we can do. But for example, we work with 8 companies at our Keio University, 3 financial sectors, 3 banks. They came up with the idea. We want to find correlation between 2 pair of stock prices, stock share prices. For example, you know that when United Airlines stock share price goes up, it's likely that the Lufthansa share price also goes up. But there are so many hidden correlation between pair of what you think would be the uncorrelated companies. But to find such hidden correlation, you have to try every pair, all the pairs, which is just exponentially large number in the real stock market. So today's computer, even today's supercomputer, cannot perform such large calculation. But we came up with this algorithm that will allow us to find such correlation. Let's say within 5 or 10 years, with the current expected growth of the IBM quantum computer, we can probably outperform supercomputer within 5 or 10 years in finding such correlation. But such correlation exists not only in stock market, but if you have huge bio data, then you will also want to find some correlation within such bio data so that you can actually discover new science. So performing such incredible large number of calculation, which is not possible with supercomputer, can be possible by our experience of using real quantum computers, not like making assumption on the desk on the white paper and pencil, but we've been using real quantum computers so we can really predict what will be like in the near future. Quantum calculation of, let's say, molecules or chemical reaction, that will be much later, let's say in 20 years or so, or 15 years maybe. But we know that it will be possible, and we are developing algorithms with chemical companies. Also, Sony, Toyota, Hitachi are part of us, and we are developing, let's say, handwriting recognitions. And if two handwritings are looks too similar, then it is impossible to recognize differences. But quantum computing may be able to do that. And so we are developing all sorts of algorithms and preparing for the future that will be made by hardware companies like IQM and also IBM and other many quantum computing companies. Thank
Jennifer,
you.
could I foreground something that I just heard that I think is, that you just said? So one of the things that we do is we're constantly looking for clusters and new nodes of signals. Because if we have signals and we can quantify them and they meet certain criteria, that gives us a sense of what's on the horizon. But that still requires a human.
Right.
We still have to figure out what models to build, so that we can explore those white spaces. Part of the promise of quantum at some point is in a large set of, and we use machine learning and people, right, to do that process. But in a large pool of uncorrelated data sets, what patterns emerge, right, is a really, really interesting use case that impacts every single industry and every single business. I think of insurance and underwriting. What's the thing that underwriters are trying to figure out? Risk. We work with them, and part of where they're constrained is they're used to looking at risk in the ways that they're familiar. If you had an ability to see new patterns in places, right, you're going to see future risk. Now, you still have to have an executive in the loop making decisions based on that, but the exploration of white spaces in a powerful, automated way, that's the holy grail for every executive. Quantum, what you're talking about now, you're talking 10 years, 15 years, so it feels like a frontier technology right now, but at some point it won't be. Right? And I think that's the point of this conversation is you got to start thinking about this right now.
Yeah,
So correlation, I think we can actually outperform quantum today's computer, let's say in 5 or 10 years. But that will be together with supercomputers and
Yes.
other today's computer. I mean, only the part that cannot be performed by to the future supercomputer or future AI will be supplemented by the power of the quantum. So we have been developing lots of interfaces between quantum computer and AI, quantum computer with supercomputer, quantum computer with other systems.
Yes.
And that's the key, as Anna pointed out.
But today, I think it's certainly fair to say that most companies don't have the people in place to be able to really take advantage of this kind of technology. So what kind of training needs to go on? What kind of skill sets will companies need to even begin starting to experiment?
Quantum is only a applied mathematics, and also computer science. So anyone with computer science or mathematics background can join us. And the key is to use the real quantum computers, so that and to try to learn how to connect between quantum computer and other computing system. And just such training, on-the-job training, will make them as quantum-ready people.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly comment on this because it's obviously very important that you skill the people that want to use it. But we have to also keep in mind that we are building here a completely new industry, a completely new ecosystem. And we are talking a lot about supply chain and shortage of chips. There are CHIPS Acts around the world, and this is also something we have to keep in mind. It's not only about the people who want to use the systems, but we have to skill people who produce them, who keep the whole ecosystem in mind. Just to give you 2 examples, so our model is to really bring the systems to computing centers. We have in Finland one system that is actually connected to Europe's largest supercomputer, Lumi, in northern Finland. It's a remote connection, but this way people get to know what does it mean to build such a system, to ship it, to operate it. And in Munich, actually, we will bring one system directly into a supercomputer, so it will be physically integrated. And there's a whole industry around this, people who build then the supercomputers, the conventional supercomputers, and who are kind of figuring out what to do with the quantum computer, where to integrate on the hardware level, on the software level. So it's very important that we educate the skills on the application side, but we need to keep in mind there's also a shortage in the whole semiconductor and computer industry as a whole. So I think this is something we have to keep in mind, that we keep this holistic view on the industry.
So I wanted to ask the panel, Anna, you touched on the idea of like a hybrid world. So today we can combine where we are now with quantum with traditional computing and do this kind of experimentation. So I wanted to talk about the kind of experimentation that's going on and how the new collaborations that are being formed.
So we are seeing a lot of activity happening in financial services. So looking at simulations, particularly how to make quantum more effective in Monte Carlo simulations, for example. In the industrial sector, for the development of new materials, right? So how you can how you can create and build things that are going to consume less energy, that are going to be lighter, that are going to be more efficient. Combination of molecules to be more advanced in battery development, for example. So when I think about green economy, I think quantum is going to play a very important role in identifying these opportunities of developing actually new technologies and new solutions. What we have been really advising our partners in the network is let the technology, the basic underlying capabilities with the hands of companies like our companies, and really focus on identifying what are the problems that are going to be best addressed by quantum, because quantum is not going to be for all types of problems, right? Quantum is a very probabilistic type of usage of technology. It's not deterministic. So if you want something that is going to give you a precise answer, that's not quantum. If you want to get a probabilistic approach of scenarios, that is the perfect scenario for quantum. So yesterday I was talking to one of the partners in our network, and he framed it perfectly. We need to start thinking about what is a quantum world, right? Not so much about how the technology is going to work. We're going to leave that to companies that have the competence in that sphere, but we need to focus our energy as industries in what the future of the world is going to be in a post-quantum world.
Okay, thank you. Kohei, so I wanted to ask you about the kind of experimentation that's going on at the hub that you've created and how you're working with industry and the kind of things you're working on.
So we have three financial sectors. They are rival companies, but they are working together to solve the common problem. We have two chemical engineering companies. They also work together. Anna mentioned about this Monte Carlo calculation. Three banks are working together because let's say if you're a banker and you're given 1 million euros and you are asked to transfer this 1 million euro to dollar to the US within 24 hours. You want to find the exact time that the euro is the strongest against dollar, right? In the next 24 hours. Currently, the financial companies or banks are spending 8 hours of the Monte Carlo calculations to find exactly when will be the time that the euro is the strongest against dollar. But you lose your first 8 hours because you're using a computer for 8 hours, right? But we found that the quantum can actually enhance such calculation because three bankers work together and at Keio University to find the algorithm or to develop an algorithm that will allow bankers to perform such calculation in much shorter time, let's say in 8 years. We are predicting that in 8 years, with the way that the quantum computing is growing, within 8 years or so, I think this kind of algorithm will outperform today's computer's extension in 80 years or so. But we are bringing in industrial people to bring in their problems because we don't know your problems. But those people with real problem come and actually share their experiences, find common problem to strengthen their competitiveness, and then they work together with us at Keio University to find possible solution.
Thank you. So, just like there was a global AI
Yeah.
race, now there's this global quantum race because it will give countries and companies a competitive edge. There's something like $90 billion in public funding that's going into quantum, and about half of that is being invested by China, about a fourth of it by Europe, and then the rest for the rest of the world. But very little is going into the global south. So how do we avoid a quantum gap like we had a digital gap? And I throw that open to whoever wants to take it.
We don't, is my simple answer. There are, like I said, I mentioned a general purpose technology, if that's not a familiar term to you. A general purpose technology, the other GPT that everybody's talking about, is a technology that has the opportunity to dramatically alter society or an economy. So I mentioned the steam engine, the internet. With a couple of friends who are economists over the summer, I was curious to know what the total valuation of the internet is. There's no way to calculate it. The only way to figure out what the total valuation of the internet is to do it in reverse. So if you turned it off, what is lost? So quantum is approaching, it will at some point be that. So will artificial intelligence, so will bioengineering. And by the way, these three areas of technology also intersect. So they're not completely siloed. The challenge is that the usual suspects are the ones pouring the overwhelming amount of capital into that in the private sector. The United States has been a little slow on this. I think we're catching up, but we've drastically underfunded basic research in these areas. China sees an opening and is investing heavily in AI, bioengineering, and quantum. This is part of its, 14th five-year, plan, because it sees this as critical to advancing its economy, its movement into different countries around the world. So yeah, the global South is put in a bad position because it's going to be challenging to find a seat at the table and have their voices heard. I will also say that the longer we sort of delegate things like patent filings and academic, the research that's happening in academia is very, very important, but the longer that we stave off true public-private partnerships, the worse that this is going to be for everybody, because the future is going to show up in a yet another bifurcated way. You asked about talent, and we heard about students, we heard about talent pools. The sad truth here is that our government officials need upskilling too, and as do executives. They don't have it's not fair to expect a governor to be an expert in governing and also an expert in AI, bioengineering, and quantum. So we don't expect that. I do expect, though, our leaders to be in a position to have meaningful conversations. You can't delegate all of this to pockets of people. You have to be able to have those conversations, because we are headed to yet another bifurcation, which we do not want, because that means that the frameworks, the rules, the outcomes are going to be dictated by whoever is politically in power at that moment in time. These are not technologies that are going to be here for 10 years and go away. This is going to set the course of human history going forward. So we need collaboration. We need competition, because that drives innovation, but we also need new forms of collaboration.
So I think we have to be, as companies in particular, very intentional, right? So our approach, as we are combining with universities, educational institutes, is really looking at the underrepresented communities in today's technology, right? So we are really looking at universities that are targeted at the Black community, for example, in the United States. So I think we have the opportunity now, as this new technology is emerging, to try to correct some of the things that we have done wrong in the past, and we have to be intentional about that.
So let me ask Kohei, what do you see as the role of government? Because in fact, I think you are in charge of the policy making for the Japanese government on quantum. So what do you see as the role of government?
So basically, Japan last year made a agreement, actually 2 years ago, made agreement with US on quantum technology, also with EU and so on, and also we are always considering bilateral agreement with other Scandinavian countries and so on. So that's the first step. But also Japanese governments, of course, focusing on like-minded country, especially when it comes to quantum technology and AI and so on. So that's something that I need to discuss more with the government, because exchange of students is very important. But at the same time, IBM Quantum is actually designated as a limited, there's a strong limitation by U.S. law on IBM Quantum computer itself. So we have to follow such protocol as well. So, we have to always find the best sort of optimize point to realize advancement on the technology, but at the same time, democratization of such technology.
Thanks. Jan, I'm going to turn to you because you are in a group that an innovation group that advises the EU. I mean, do they understand the importance of this? And what's your view on the need for public-private collaboration?
Yeah, indeed. So I'm part of the board of the European Innovation Council, which works very closely with the Commission on such kind of topics. And I'm very positive because there is, I think, a lot of awareness meanwhile, especially in the Commission, about new technologies and the importance of it. And I think there's a strong drive to really change the situation so that actually we are becoming more aware and also more prepared, more resilient for the future. And in this sense, I have the feeling that actually from a European perspective, we are quite well prepared. Just to give you an example, with the EIC, I think they're investing 2 billion every year in new technology, disruptive startups, and they're focusing specifically on those kind of technologies that we are discussing here. So I think there has been a change in awareness for certain policymakers, also when it comes to chips and supply shortage. So I think they're rethinking the approach, which I think is a very positive signal. And the whole kind of collaborative approach as well. So I think this is what we're discussing here, how to engage universities, governments, companies. I think this has come to the mind of the leaders of Europe, at least in Brussels, I would say.
Okay, super. So I want to open up to some questions from the floor. Do we have? Yes.
My company is investing in.
Oh, please, can you just stand up and identify yourself?
Okay, I'm the chairman of DESA Group, which is one of the largest natural gas company. And I'm very interested in the energy efficiency. And when I heard that 20% of electricity in California is used for supercomputer, so I definitely there is a need to improve the efficiency of the calculation. And quantum seems to be suggesting a room for improvement. But I myself am very interested in this quantum physics thing. Yes. I'm teaching myself and I'm helped by the prominent scholars in important institutions to teach myself. But during the course of my endeavor, I found that quantum physics is already more than 100 years old discipline, and all of a sudden there's another renaissance, fever of quantum physics, and it seems to me that that's because Shor algorithm shows the possibility that classical encryption can be useless when the quantum decoding become possible. And that's why I think America and China become very, in a way, keen about the development of these quantum computing things. Other peaceful use is also possible, I think, but it's just my impression is that quantum encryption and decoding is the main hidden agenda in all this development. And as an energy expert I was actually the chairman of the World Energy Council, which is one of the prominent global institutions in energy industry. And I think many countries have been investing in the peaceful use of nuclear fission after we made the nuclear fusion bomb, demonstrated the nuclear fusion bomb is possible. But so far, they always say that it will be successful in 50 days, 50 years. And again, we say that it will be possible in 50 years to make a peaceful use of nuclear fusion. And that's my impression. When I think the problem with noise in quantum computing and the need to have more qubits to correct all this noise, I think we seem to be mired into more and more difficult problems. And no one is clearly pointing out that this cannot be possible in a near future. But so now my problem is that we are spending a lot of money, a lot of effort in quantum computing, but at the end of the day, probably this is my impression, is that at the end of the day, the supercomputer will stay still in mainstream, and the quantum computing will be used in a very specific area like decoding, things like that.
So I'll let the panel react to that, but I think, yesterday there was an affiliated session here at the Forum on Quantum, and someone got up and said, well, when I was in university, we were very excited about fusion, and here we are 50 years later, and it's not here. I think that there's a very real difference with quantum because we are seeing steady progress, and we are getting close to the tipping point. So who wants to respond?
I think you raised very important points. So on the security, to start with, yes, we need to prepare for a world where quantum is going to break all the encryption keys that are out there, and there are already algorithms that support that. So the recommendation is prepare yourself, start implementing those technologies. We at IBM, for example, provide hardware and software to support that. Then you talked about the issue of scale. Scale by itself is not going to solve the problem. You need to also address quality, making sure that those qubits behave well, and you need to make sure that the circuits that you have execute at a faster speed, as I started in my speech. And then the topic of value, I'm not an energy expert, but it's really how you can do more without having to really continue to grow exponentially the size and the energy consumption of those equipments. So that's why you have to have really this holistic approach when you are developing the technology, or you end up having issues and problems like the ones that you are raising.
Just a very quick comment on the energy. So it's important to note that energy is power multiplied by time, and we are talking here about significantly reducing the time, right? So this is kind of how you think about it. However, this doesn't then mean that for the rest of the time we leave the computer idle. So there's kind of a catch-22, right? People call it rebound effect. So you become more energy efficient on solving some problem, but then you can just solve many, many more problems. So that's the way to think about it.
We're almost out of time, so I want to
Just one quick
sure.
difference between fusion and quantum is that we have the real quantum computers. Because that was a tipping point that happened 4 or 5 years ago. Now we're using real quantum computers. When it comes to fusion, they're not really, they don't have the fusion reaction.
Okay,
So, yeah.
so I want to just get each of you to very quickly say if there's one thing that people in the room should take away from this panel, what should it be? Amy?
You need to do long-range, data-driven scenario planning because there's no sense of urgency outside of the highly technical areas. But this is going to be one of these things where there will be advancements, and your organizations, whether you are a government official or you're an executive at a company, are going to be left behind. Failing to plan for the future is planning to fail.
Okay.
Don't listen to those who don't use real quantum computers. Those who do use quantum computers know how they're developing. So don't listen to those who don't use real quantum computers.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
So I think quantum is very much about the topic of this Davos forum, a collaboration in a fragmented world. So this is very much what we need across governments, companies, and also academia.
Anna.
So think about the problems that you would like to solve with quantum. Start investing in creating the talent pool to support that, and work in a collaborative way with companies that are developing the solutions.
So I think the key takeaway here is we still don't know exactly when the quantum tipping point is going to happen, but it's coming, and you need to be ready. And with that, I would like to invite Derek Halloran, who is heading up the forum's program on the quantum economy, to come on up here on the stage.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and thank you to all of our fantastic panelists here. I know also, just looking around the room, we have a great deal of expertise even just in the audience here. I just wanted to say a very quick word. So with the forum, all of our panelists here and their organizations are part of something we call the Quantum Economy Network. This is an open network which is currently composed of about 180 organizations across business, governments, civil society, academia. We are opening it up to digital membership over the course of the year ahead, and we focus on the issues that were raised here, how we build a responsible but incredibly exciting quantum world. 3 pillars that we focus on: one around industry applications and how we can transform industries like pharmaceuticals, like energy, like the fertilizers for agriculture. Secondly, preparing for that quantum safe world. And then third, around ethics and ensuring that we drive equity and that this is a technology that benefits all. So invite everybody, please have a look online and come join that conversation, whether you're a deep expert or you want to learn about it and figure out what this thing is all about. Everybody is welcome. So with that, thank you all very much, and thanks again to our great panelists.